My best friend, Ben, shared my deepest secrets, edited messages to frame me, and created a fake relationship. Now I'm fighting to reclaim my truth and trust. I, 20F, need help processing something that's been eating away at me for the past week. This is going to be a long post because there's a lot of background needed to understand the situation. I met Ben, 25M, at a college party about 8 months ago through my roommate Sarah, who knew him from her economics class. I wasn't planning to go to the party that night because I had an exam the next week, but Sarah insisted, saying I needed to stop being so focused on studies and live a little. When I met Ben that night, we instantly clicked. He was different from the other guys at the party, more mature, actually interested in having real conversations instead of just trying to hook up. We ended up talking for hours about everything from our career goals to our favorite books. He got my number that night and we started texting regularly. Over the next few weeks, our relationship grew into this weird space between friendship and dating. We would text all day, call each other at night, and eventually started this routine where we'd fall asleep on the phone together. It became so normal that I couldn't sleep properly on nights when we didn't call. We never put a label on what we were, and honestly I was okay with that because I had just gotten out of a messy situation with my ex-FWB Nick, 23M, about a year ago. Speaking of Nick, that situation was complicated. We had been friends first, then started hooking up, and it got messy when feelings got involved. It ended badly when I found out he was seeing other people while telling me he wasn't ready for a relationship. I was really hurt by that experience, which is partly why I was so cautious about dating again. I told Ben all about this because he had become my closest confidant. I shared everything with him, my insecurities, my trust issues from past relationships, family problems, everything. Ben always positioned himself as this wise mentor figure in my life, even though he was only 5 years older. At first, I found it endearing how much he seemed to care about my well-being. He would give me advice about my classes, my future career, my relationships with friends and family. He'd tell me things like, "You're so mature for your age and I just want to help you avoid the mistakes I made." But over time, his advice started feeling more like control. He had opinions about everything I did, what classes I should take, who I should be friends with, how I should spend my free time. If I didn't follow his advice, he'd get upset and sometimes threaten to stop talking to me. He'd say things like, "I'm only trying to help you, but if you don't want to listen, maybe we shouldn't talk anymore." The breaking point came about 2 months ago. I was having a really terrible day. I had failed an important test, had a fight with my mom, and was just feeling overwhelmed. My roommates were smoking weed and invited me to join them. I don't usually smoke, but that day I thought it might help me relax. I ended up getting way too high and started having a panic attack. I called Ben because I was scared and needed someone to calm me down. Instead of helping me, he got angry. He started lecturing me about how disappointed he was, how he thought I was smarter than this, how I was throwing away my potential. When I tried to explain that I was scared and needed his support, he told me that if I ever smoked again, he would stop talking to me completely because clearly I wasn't taking his mentorship seriously. That incident made me start questioning our entire relationship. I realized that most of our interactions followed this pattern: me sharing something personal or vulnerable, him using that information to tell me how I should behave differently. It was like he saw me as this project he could perfect rather than an actual person. About a month later, we had a huge fight about it. I told him I was in some puppet he could control, and that his mentorship felt more like manipulation. He got really defensive and said I was being ungrateful, that everything he did was to help me become a better person. He said I clearly wasn't ready for someone to care about me enough to tell me hard truths. After that fight, we stopped talking. I was hurt but thought maybe it was for the best. Then last week, I started getting angry messages from Nick. He was asking why I was going around telling people intimate details about our relationship. I was confused until he mentioned his cousin Mark had told him everything. Apparently, Ben and Mark had gone on a group vacation together through some mutual friends, and Ben had shared all sorts of private details about my relationship with Nick, including things I had never even said. I felt sick to my stomach. These were private conversations between me and Ben. Things I had shared during late-night phone calls when I was feeling vulnerable and trusted him completely. I immediately called Ben to confront him. His excuse was absolutely ridiculous. He claimed that during their vacation, Mark must have figured out his phone password and gone through his messages with me. He kept apologizing but insisted he never told Mark anything directly. The whole story makes no sense. Why would Mark randomly go through Ben's phone? And even if he did, why would he specifically look for conversations about me and then tell Nick about them? Ben and Mark aren't even close friends. They only went on this vacation because they were both friends with another guy in the group. I've been torn apart thinking about this whole situation. Did Ben ever actually care about me? Or was I just some source of entertainment and gossip for him? He spent months talking to me every day, staying up late just to fall asleep on the phone together. Was that all fake? He knew about my trust issues, knew how hard it was for me to open up to people, knew about all my past relationship trauma, and he still betrayed my trust like this. The worst part is that some of what got back to Nick wasn't even accurate. Ben had apparently modified or completely fabricated certain details, making me look really bad. Now Nick probably thinks I've been bad-mouthing him to everyone, which I never did. I only ever discussed our past relationship with Ben because I thought I could trust him. I blocked Ben on everything after our call because his excuses were just making me angrier. Now mutual friends are saying I should hear him out because maybe there's more to the story. They're saying I'm being too harsh and that Ben really cared about me. But I don't see how someone who claims to care about me could betray my trust like this. Sarah thinks Ben was just trying to impress Mark by sharing stories about his crazy friend with benefits, but that doesn't make it any better. If anything, it makes it worse because it means he used my personal life as entertainment for others. I feel so stupid for trusting him with all my secrets. I keep thinking about all the other private things I told him and wondering who else he's told. Every time my phone buzzes, I'm afraid it's going to be someone else confronting me about something Ben has said about me. I don't know how to move forward from this betrayal. Date 1. First, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. Your support and advice really helped me process this situation. Unfortunately, things have gotten even more complicated over the past 2 weeks, and I need to get this off my chest. After I blocked Ben on everything, he started showing up at places where he knew I would be. At first, I thought it was coincidence, seeing him at the campus coffee shop where I usually study, or at the library during my regular study hours. But then it became clear he was deliberately trying to run into me. He would suddenly appear outside my classes, pretending he was just passing by, or show up at the cafeteria during my usual lunch break. At first, I would just ignore him and walk away, but last week, he managed to corner me after my evening psychology class. I usually take the path behind the science building to get to my car because it's shorter, and he must have known this because he was waiting there. When I tried to turn around and take a different route, he called out and practically jogged over to me. This time, he had a completely different story from the phone hacking excuse. He admitted that he did tell Mark about me and Nick, but he had this whole new explanation. According to him, he had heard through some mutual friends that Nick was trying to get back in touch with me. Ben claimed he was worried about me falling back into that toxic relationship. His words, not mine, and he panicked. He said he thought if he could make Nick angry enough at me, Nick wouldn't try to reconnect. But while this part, Nick was never trying to get back in touch with me. I checked with our mutual friends, and no one had heard anything about Nick wanting to contact me. Ben had completely fabricated this threat in his head and then used it to justify spreading my private information. When I pointed this out to him, he got flustered and said that he must have misunderstood what people were saying. But that's not even the worst part. Yesterday, Sarah, my roommate, told me something that made everything click in a horrible way. She had been at a party last weekend with some people from her economics class, including a few of Ben's close friends. After a few drinks, one of them started talking about Ben's girlfriend troubles. Sarah was confused because as far as she knew, Ben was single. Turns out, Ben had been telling people we were actually dating this whole time. He would talk about falling asleep on the phone with me, about how he was helping me become a better person, about our deep late-night conversations. He had created this whole narrative where he was this supportive boyfriend helping his troubled girlfriend work through her issues. Some of his friends even thought we had been officially dating for months. When Sarah heard this, she immediately texted me. I was shocked. This explained so many weird interactions I've had with people in Ben's circle, the knowing looks, the comments about how cute we were together, the questions about how our relationship was going. I had always brushed these off as people making assumptions, but now I realized Ben had been actively feeding them this false narrative. I couldn't help myself, I had to confront him about this. I sent him a long text asking why he had been telling people we were dating when he knew we weren't. His response left me speechless. He said that in his mind, we were basically in a relationship because of how close we were. He said he thought I felt the same way because why else would I share so much with him and spend so much time talking to him? When I pointed out that he had never actually asked me to be his girlfriend or expressed any romantic interest, his response was even more bizarre. He said he was showing it through his actions by trying to guide me and help me make better decisions. Apparently, all that controlling behavior, the advice, the threats to stop talking to me if I didn't listen to him, the constant judgment of my choices, that was his way of showing love. It's made me question every single interaction we ever had. Was this his plan all along? Get me to trust him, share my vulnerabilities, and then use them to control me. The worst part is, he knew about my trust issues. He knew about my past relationships, about how hard it was for me to open up to people. Did he use all of that information to manipulate me more effectively? The mutual friends who were initially defending him have started to back off. A couple of them have even reached out to apologize for pushing me to hear him out. Apparently, he's been telling different versions of the story to different people, And they finally caught on when the stories didn't add up. Some people got the phone hacking story, others got the protecting me from Nick story, and others got some completely different versions. Now he started using different phone numbers to contact me since I blocked his main one. The messages swing wildly between desperate apologies and attempts to justify his actions. One minute he's saying he's sorry and he'll do anything to make it right. The next he's saying I'm overreacting and that everything he did was because he cared about me so much. I've saved all the messages just in case things escalate further, but I haven't responded to any of them. Some friends have suggested I get a no contact order, but I'm hoping it won't come to that. For now, I'm just trying to stay away from any places where I might run into him and making sure I'm never alone on campus. This whole situation has made me realize how naive I was. I thought I was being cautious after my experience with Nick, but somehow I ended up in an even more twisted situation with Ben. At least with Nick, I knew where I stood. This thing with Ben feels like I've been living in some alternate reality where nothing was what it seemed. Day 2. I didn't think this situation could get any more messed up, but here we are. A lot has happened since my last update, and the truth is even worse than I imagined. Remember how Ben claimed Mark must have gone through his phone during their vacation? Well, I finally got the real story. Mark reached out to me through Sarah last week saying he wanted to clear things up. I was hesitant to meet him at first, but Sarah offered to be there with me, so I agreed to meet at a coffee shop on campus. What Mark told me was disturbing. According to him, during their week-long vacation, Ben was obsessed with getting information about Nick. It wasn't just casual questions either. Ben would constantly try to steer conversations toward Nick, asking about his current dating life, his job, where he hung out, basically anything he could learn about Nick's current life. Mark said he found it weird because he barely knew Ben, and here was this guy constantly asking about his cousin. When Mark wouldn't give him much information, Ben started sharing stories about Nick and me, obviously trying to get Mark to reciprocate with information about Nick. But here's where it gets really twisted. Ben wasn't just sharing real information. He was making up elaborate stories about me and Nick. He told Mark that I was still obsessed with Nick and talked about him constantly, completely false. He claimed I had been trying to sabotage Nick's new relationships by spreading rumors about him, also false. He even said I had been driving by Nick's apartment late at night. I don't even know where Nick lives now. The most shocking part: Ben had evidence to back up his claims. He showed Mark screenshots of our conversations, but they weren't real. Mark showed me some of these screenshots on his phone and I was horrified. Ben had actually edited our text conversations to make it look like I was saying things I never said. For example, there was one conversation where I had been talking about feeling nervous about an upcoming presentation. Ben had somehow edited it to make it look like I was talking about feeling anxious about seeing Nick with his new girlfriend. In another message where I had been venting about a difficult professor, he had changed it to make it look like I was ranting about Nick. Some of the messages were completely fabricated. There were entire conversations that never happened, where I was saying horrible things about Nick and his new relationships. Ben had even edited timestamps to make it look like these conversations happened recently, not months ago. Mark said he actually felt really uncomfortable with how obsessed Ben seemed to be with the whole situation. He said Ben would bring up Nick and me in conversations where it didn't make any sense, and would get really intense about it. That's why Mark eventually told Nick what was going on. He was worried about how fixated Ben was becoming. When I showed Mark the real versions of some of the conversations Ben had edited, he was shocked but not surprised. He said that during their vacation, Ben would spend hours on his phone, and now Mark wonders if he was creating these fake screenshots. Mark also mentioned that Ben would get really defensive if anyone tried to use his phone, even for something innocent like looking up directions or checking the weather. Now we know why. He probably had all these edited conversations on there. The whole thing makes me feel sick. Ben didn't just betray my trust by sharing private information. He actually spent time and effort creating fake evidence to make me look obsessed and unstable. He must have put hours into editing those screenshots, changing dates, and fabricating entire conversations. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment or a case of sharing too much while trying to impress someone. This was calculated and deliberate. I've been going through all our past interactions in my head, trying to figure out if there were signs I missed. Did he take screenshots of all our conversations, planning to use them later? Was he collecting information about me and Nick the whole time? Was our entire friendship just him gathering ammunition to use against me? Sarah suggested I take screenshots of the fake conversations and save them somewhere safe, just in case Ben tries to spread them around to other people. She also helped me check my social media privacy settings and suggested I warn my close friends about the situation in case Ben tries to show them these edited screenshots. The whole thing has left me feeling paranoid and violated. This guy didn't just share my secrets. He created an entire false narrative about me being some obsessed ex who couldn't move on. And he put so much effort into it, creating fake evidence and everything. I don't even understand what he was trying to achieve. Was he trying to make Nick hate me? Was he trying to make himself look better in comparison? Was this all just some weird game to him? Date 3. This will be my final update on this situation. After discovering the edited screenshots, I knew I had to do something to protect myself. I couldn't just let Ben continue spreading these lies about me, especially since I had no idea who else he might have shown those fake conversations to. I decided to be proactive. I gathered all the real versions of the conversations Ben had edited, along with screenshots of his messages from different numbers trying to manipulate me into talking to him again. I also had Mark write down everything Ben had said and done during their vacation. I posted all of this evidence in our mutual friends group chat, along with a detailed explanation of what had been happening. Ben's reaction was exactly what you'd expect from someone whose lies were being exposed. He completely lost it. He started messaging everyone in our friend group individually, trying to do damage control. His stories kept changing. First he said the edited screenshots were just a joke, then he claimed his phone had been hacked again, then he tried saying he had evidence that I was lying but conveniently couldn't show it. The most surprising development was that Nick reached out to me. He actually came to my apartment to apologize in person for believing Ben's stories without talking to me first. We had a long conversation where we cleared up all the misunderstandings. When I showed him the real versions of the conversations versus Ben's edited ones, he was horrified. He admitted that he'd been confused about why I would suddenly start saying such horrible things about him after we'd ended things relatively amicably. What's really interesting is that after everything came out, other people started coming forward with their own stories about Ben. A girl from his economics class told me he'd done something similar to her last year, pretending they were dating and telling people she was obsessed with him. Another guy said Ben had spread rumors about him being a drug dealer just because he refused to sell Ben his concert tickets. The fallout has been intense. Most of our mutual friends have cut Ben off completely. I heard from Sarah that he's telling people he's going to transfer to a different college next semester because the environment here has become toxic. Classic manipulator move, playing the victim when he gets caught. Some people suggest that I should take legal action about the edited screenshots, especially since I have clear evidence of him creating false information about me. But honestly, I just want this whole thing to be over. I've made sure everyone who needs to know the truth knows it, and that's enough for me. I'm not interested in dragging this out any longer. I've blocked him on everything and made all my social media private. I've also started being more careful about what information I share with people and keeping records of my conversations, just in case. Sarah tells me Ben is still trying to tell his version of the story to anyone who will listen, but fewer and fewer people are buying it. The silver lining in all this is that it's brought me closer to my real friends. Sarah and my other roommates have been incredibly supportive throughout this whole mess. They've helped me deal with the emotional fallout and made sure I never had to face Ben alone on campus. I'm focusing on my studies now and trying to move forward. Yes, this experience has made me more cautious about trusting people, but I'm trying not to let it make me completely cynical. Some lessons are expensive, and this one cost me my ability to trust easily, but at least I learned it before things got even worse. At least now I know what to look out for, and I'm much better at spotting red flags. For anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, trust your gut. If someone's behavior feels off, it probably is. And never feel bad about protecting yourself and your privacy. Some people will call you paranoid or say you're overreacting, but it's better to be safe than sorry.